It's like the Wild West. I mean, there's some that are using AI, like they have 10, 15 agents that they've developed and that are helping them, find and source. And there's recruiters that are releasing their LinkedIn recruiter license and not even using LinkedIn recruiter to find people, which they predominantly did over the last decade. But on the flip side, I've heard corporate stories, where companies abandoned, human people and went to AI and they realized AI isn't working and now they're going back to, the human piece of it.
You've been at the top of your game for years. Your resume should practically write itself, right? Wrong. The most accomplished executives are often the worst at talking about what they actually do, and that's costing them. We're getting into the stuff nobody tells you, the real job market for senior leaders right now, whether AI is helping or hurting your chances, why women still negotiate differently, and what to do about it. And the question I think everyone needs to ask themselves: are you fulfilled, or have you just gotten really good at settling? This is Possibilities with Monique de Maio, and this conversation with executive career strategist Lisa Rangel is one that you'll want to hear twice. Lisa Rangel is the founder and CEO of ChameleonResumes.com, a leading executive resume writing and job landing consulting firm. Since founding the firm in 2009, she has helped executives secure top roles through strategic branding and modern recruiting practices, after having a 13-year career as an executive recruiter herself. Her expertise has been featured in more than 200 media outlets, including CNN, Fortune, Times, CNBC, BBC, Business Insider, Newsweek, Fast Company, Good Morning America, and I'm not going to name the other 300. All right. So, a proud Cornell University graduate and first-generation college student, Lisa serves on the Presidential Council for Cornell Women and the advisory board of Lex Duo, an agentic AI firm serving the recruiting industry. She can be reached on LinkedIn, and we'll put her link in the show notes. Lisa's mission is to make the world a better place, one fulfilling job change at a time. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for that intro. I appreciate it, and for the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. You have such great... Those of you listening should really look up Lisa on LinkedIn, because she always has an incredible amount of wonderful content, suggestions, videos, how-tos, resources, and you're just a pro. And I've just enjoyed having you as a contact, a friend, a confidant for the last decade or so, and want to get right into it. So 13-year recruiting career, then you start Chameleon Resumes in 2009, right in the middle of a recession. Most people would have to say they'd play it safe, but you didn't. What did you see that others did not?
Yeah, that was an interesting time. I was just always good at writing resumes, even as a recruiter. I saw the value in having, when I was recruiting, a candidate being properly positioned on paper. It would lead to an interview happening with that prospective client. And that's the catalyst. An interview is the catalyst for me making a fee, to be totally crude, right? If my candidate that I represented got hired to that client company, then I made a fee. So the resume was a catalyst to that. And I saw the value in it pretty quickly. And that's how I became good at them. If I saw what the candidate brought to the table, and if I knew what the client needed and what they wanted to pay a fee for, then you put those things together and make a match, right? So it sounds overly easy, but that's really how it started. And even as I rose through the ranks as a recruiter, I was just good at it. I was able to do it in a few minutes. I was always able to see what a candidate had that a client wanted to see and make that near the top. And it just was something that was intuitive. And I got a little burned out on recruiting by 2008-9. And Lord knows that in 2009, everybody, especially in the New York area where I was, needed a resume. So I just started doing it and charging for it. And I did take some contract assignments, recruiting contract assignments, because, as a breadwinner, I still had to pay the bills. But I just kind of let everything go to the universe. And I was like, well, the market's going to tell me where I need to go. And people needed what I was doing on the resume side. So it just sort of took off from there. And that's really how it was born.
That's amazing. I'm thinking about 2009, and what happened then, and it was a rough time, and also to your point, people were getting thrown out of all these companies and looking for their next new. You've reviewed thousands of resumes. This is what you've done. Like, what do you think the biggest mistakes senior leaders have been making, always make? What does that look like?
I think over the years, as much as it would make a great, soundbite, I don't know if there's one biggest mistake type of thing. I would say, common mistakes are that people do their resume from a backward, looking back standpoint versus viewing it as a marketing document, showcasing what you want to continue to do. And that should be in common with what the prospective employer needs. Like, I think people fail to make it a marketing document, and it's more of a backwards driven, here's everything I've ever done document, which kind of leads to the second most common mistake, is that people view it as like, I got to put everything in here that I've ever done, plus the kitchen sink, to prove to you that I'm so experienced. Our approach is really the opposite. At this point, executives at this point, they are clearly competent. Like, they're clearly amazing. That's not up for debate in my book. So you take this time to really look at what you've done and decide what you want to continue doing, but equally decide what you don't want to do anymore. And that's really where an executive needs to start diminishing, if not outright deleting, what they don't want to do anymore. And that's sometimes hard to let go, because those achievements that you don't want to do anymore, they might be great. They might be awesome to tell that story in an interview or at a cocktail party, or, but if you don't want to do it anymore, you should not be putting it on your marketing document, or at least diminish the presence if it can't be outright deleted. And those are decisions we make. It's not general advice of like diminish the thing or delete the thing. It's about the strategy. And does it make sense to leave it on, but not putting it in a prominent position? Or does it make sense to finally pay honor to it and let it go? Right. So, but I think a lot of writers in my space and a lot of executives in general get to this, kitchen sink point. And it's not about proving anymore. It's about being discerning about what you want to continue to do. And that's a big mistake I see people make.
I'm going to comment on that. So you had a recent video where you talked about, leading with 25 years experience, 30 years experience, 15 years. Well, you know what? When you're a senior executive, you're going to have decades of experience, and that's kind of table stakes, right? So to that point, the idea of, I always say, different is better than better. The clarity around what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and to the point that we're making here, is that the resume is a marketing document for the things you want to continue to do, lean into doing, potentially start to do, not or look back on what you've done. Because if you want to do more of the same, then keep talking about it, because then they'll put you in the box. I just literally dropped a podcast that talks about being in that box. So if you're a COO and all you talk about being a COO, but you're done being a COO, stop talking about being a COO.
Right. And reposition in the way you want to be seen.
So that brings me to my next question, is about, we always talk about, what's your special, I talk about what's your special sauce, whether that's a personal brand or a business brand. It's like, what authenticity, and I hate that freaking word because it's overused these days, but this idea that I can look at a human on LinkedIn and appreciate and understand what that human stands for. And so I want you to talk about the sort of the fine balance between authenticity and oversharing or being strategic on LinkedIn.
I think everyone has to look at everything they do on LinkedIn as either an attraction or a repulsion exercise. I think people go about it in that they're trying to be accepted by everyone. And that makes people, I think, make really bad decisions, whether it's in vanilla, content or in cringe content. Like, you can go in either direction, right? I think we've just entered a realm where there's just really no rules per se. There's judgment. And, you know, in testing the waters and pushing the boundaries, you might make mistakes. I've made mistakes, but I think generally speaking, the advice I give about LinkedIn is conduct yourself the way you would in a big room of people, the way you would on LinkedIn. Like to me, comments are like, if they're on posts that are people I know, it's like nurturing an existing relationship and I've seen someone again at an event. If it's commenting on somebody I don't know, like a second or third degree connection, it's the equivalent of walking up to somebody I don't know in a room and going, "Hey, how are you doing? What brings you here?" Like what's your goal for being here? Messaging people in LinkedIn messaging, like conduct yourself the way you would on in person. I don't think it's bad to reach out to people you don't know. I think there's a way to do it. I would not walk up to somebody in a room full of people and approach someone I don't know and go, "Hello, I'm an operational executive who blah 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 blah," or "Would you buy my book?" Or here's, like I wouldn't do that, right? Like I wouldn't do that. So, I do think it's okay to sometimes use LinkedIn messaging as like a direct mail function, but it should be that you're looking at everybody's profile before you send it. Make it clear that this is a blanketed mailing. Don't try to pretend that it's not a blanketed mailing when, or cut and paste or whatever. Like, and, I think that, sometimes reaching out to people cold gets a bad name, but it's frankly the only way you expand your network. At some point, everyone in our current network was somebody we didn't know. So, you know, yeah, there's some people doing it poorly nowadays, but I even had recently someone reach out to me in a way that I wouldn't have done it. Like their first outreach to me was to buy their book. And I just said, "Hey, how about we talk instead?" And we did. And this person's great. Like, you know what I mean? So, you know, would I sit there and say, "Don't ever, outreach again"? No. I've made mistakes. I've had people go, "You just met me last week and you sent this thing that, I missed that I knew them and I sent this thing." And so I just said, "You know what? You're right. I totally made a mistake. But hey, how about we just chat?" That's the ultimate goal of all this stuff anyway. And sometimes it works and they're awesome. And then they're open-minded people that I just connected with who saw me as a human who made a mistake and allowed me to apologize. And then there's people who are like, "Oh, I'm not going to deal with you anymore." Great. Unfriend me. We're good. That's it. You're not my people. Because I want an audience of people who see me as a human and realize I am running a business and I am going to make mistakes and that's okay. And they're going to make mistakes and I'm okay with that too. So I think that it's just about conducting yourself. And it's sort of a long-winded way of saying conduct yourself on LinkedIn the way you would conduct yourself if you walked into a room and talked to somebody.
I'm very interested, just the person who said, like, just buy my book, did that come around when you actually turned it around? And I give you credit for not being like, "Oh, for God's sake," and you actually engaged and spoke to the human. Um, did you get a chance to kind of say to them, "Hey, by the way, in the future, like, don't hit me up with an ask before you know who I am"?
I said, "You tried something and maybe it didn't work, but it got us to talking. So how much of a mistake was it?" You know? Like, or at least, don't, you tried something new, right? I mean, because it could have worked. Maybe she would have sold, 1,000 books, but if everybody walked away from that book sale going, who cares that you sold 1,000 books, right? So, like, that's why I'm saying, like, even with job seekers, like, I tell people, if you are earnestly doing an outreach to the best of your ability, you've researched it, whether it's a referral, whether it's a cold approach, whether it's somebody you haven't talked to in 5 years that now is in a position to possibly help you. Like, if you are earnestly doing your best to try to reach out to them genuinely and they view it in a negative way, have the confidence to go, "Okay, they weren't my people," as opposed to like, "Oh my God, I guessed the approach wrong." Right? Like, that's the shift, I think. Like, we have to move out of this people pleasing, hoop jumping, approve me, like mindset, which I know is not easy. I don't say that with any glibness or arrogance. Like, and get into like, okay, if I'm doing the best that I can and it's still not working, then that means this isn't the direction or these are the people or both, right? So now I know when you're wanting to do a job search, wanting to work and you're not working or you're in a job that you hate and you want to get out, like those words may sound, very luxurious, but ultimately, if you don't get in touch with that part of yourself, you are going to approach every interaction from a place of desperation, and or you're going to be looking to get out versus looking at what you're going into and possibly repeating what you already have somewhere else. So the key is doing the inside work. And I think the authenticity comes from you being you
Right.
and knowing you're doing the best you can and accepting that some people just won't want it. And that's okay, because it means, because let's face it, let's think it through. If they do accept you, that doing you, now you're in a place where you can be fully yourself without walking on eggshells. And worse, if you do all of the guesswork and it works, well, guess what? You're going to have to continue guessing, right? Or wait for the day that you guess wrong because you're not authentically you. You're trying to do what they need. And that's the problem I think a lot of people make, whether it's job searching, whether it's marketing themselves as an entrepreneur. And yeah, so sometimes you're going to make those mistakes and overshare because you're trying to be authentic. You're trying to show the real thing. Is it a mistake? I don't know. Who are you attracting when you do that? That's really the ultimate litmus test. Are you attracting who you want to attract? Right? And are you rightfully repelling the people who should not be taking your message?
So, yeah, we're talking about, which is a perfect segue. I wish you did it so beautifully. We're talking about really senior executives with a lot of value, and they are often the worst at expressing their value proposition. What do you like? What do you tell them? It's like, dude, what?
You brought up something earlier that a lot of senior level people rely on seniority, right? And, what do all 55-year-olds have in common? They have 33 years of experience since they graduated college at 22, assuming that was your path, right? So, like, leading with that is not a differentiator. It's like saying, I'm a human and I wear pants. Like, okay, right? How does that, right? So, and the other aspect to it that most people don't think of it until I tell them is you would never, a company, I mean, they shouldn't, right? A company will never say, we're not hiring you because you have 33 years of experience, right? That would be ageism. But, guess what? 30-year-olds don't have 30 years of experience. So when you lead with that, you're essentially leading with age. And then even though ageism is always wrong, but you're leading with it. So you can't say it's wrong in one sense, but then that's the reason why you're qualified in another sense, right? Like, and I'm certainly not going to say, candidates are using ageism in return, like, but we are, right? And I say we because I'm 55, right? So like we are. The key is to lead with recent relevant achievements. At any age, recent relevant achievements are ageless. And it's really the only reason why people should get hired is because you have the recent relevancy that is needed in a particular organization based on the opportunity or the problems they have before them.
So, what does the job market look like for senior execs today?
It's difficult. And I feel like I've been saying it's difficult for the last, since COVID every year, but it's a different reason every year, So, right, what's that statement, the only constant is change, right? I think it's hard for a lot of reasons. I think it's hard because the recruiting profession is literally being upended by AI, by the fact that hiring is down, right? You don't need as many recruiters if you're not hiring people. AI is making parts of the recruiting function more efficient. It's also making parts of the job really difficult. So I think that's number one. I think number two, AI on the job seeker side has really polluted the candidate pool for recruiters. I hear and see the recruiters dealing with it on the other side when they get 1,000 resumes submitted to a job posting, and pretty much you can tell every person or a good majority of them have taken their resume and the job description and put it in any, AI app du jour to say, make my resume meet this job description. Well, now you multiply that times, 800 out of 1,000 resumes and add that they're mostly task-based and not achievement-based. These poor recruiters are basically looking at 800 versions of a job description with someone's name on it, and they can't tell who is doing the job well, right? So, and then candidates will then internalize the lack of response as, oh, it must be AI never got my resume to a human. It's like, no, whether it was a human or an AI search process, you wrote yourself up poorly and you're not getting chosen. That's, but in absence of information, people tend to fill in the blanks with information they can't control. And instead of saying, what else can I do to make myself a stronger candidate? They just go, oh, it must be the recruiter. It's terrible. Oh, it must be AI not seeing my resume. No, how about the fact that you wrote a terrible resume because you're leading it with tasks, you're leading it with responsibilities, you're not clear with the job that you want up top. And then and you are also missing achievements, missing outcomes. How do we know you did your job well, right? If every candidate going for a COO role or a, staff accountant role just has the bullet, I closed the books at the end of the month, or, I led the operations of 200 people. Well, did you lead those 200 people well or poorly? Did you close the books on time or were you chronically late? Right? So how well you did that job, how well you did that function, that bullet on your resume is what gets you an interview, not just simply listing that you did it. And that's a lot of times what happens.
Yeah. So you and I had a conversation, I think via LinkedIn, or maybe I took it away from one of your videos. That's what it was, and I sent it to 3 of my mentees. And I always send people your newsletter and your videos, and like, you should check this out, and blah blah blah. And it was the concept that certain or colleges and universities are telling the kids, I call them kids because I had a couple, no objective line at the top. And this is something that I am very passionate about. If you are making me work as an employer, what the hell? Tell me what you stand for and tell me the value that you're going to bring to me. So I have always said, you absolutely need an objective. You absolutely need to tell me what you are going to bring to my company and why the hell I should even talk to you.
So here's the problem. And God bless college career centers, right? Like, this is not a try, because there's some really great ones out there. It's like anything else, right? There's really great people in my field and there's terrible people in my field. And there's great career centers and there's terrible career centers. And there's great and terrible in every category, right? There's great recruiters and there's terrible recruiters. So, there's no blanketed statement one way or the other about any profession, right? It's going back to right, this is a marketing exercise, right? Job search is a marketing exercise, right? A college career center typically has employers come to the campus and gives them, the notebook, right? Back in the day, and now it's probably a file, gives them a book of candidates to, flip through. And they didn't need an objective on the top because they knew every candidate that was coming, every potential graduate that was coming to that, campus career fair, they might say, here's the 50 candidates that are looking for financial analyst roles. These are the 50 candidates that are looking to be in a management trainee program. So everything was already bracketed and sorted and booked. And so you could lead with the college, see what their degree is, and then see what their experience is. And that consistent setup, imagine flipping a book, right? Seeing it in the same format every time makes it easier for that campus recruiter, right? That's the evolution of that format. The problem now is that campus recruiters are not going to campuses as often. The entry-level hiring is down. And I personally did not get hired on campus from my desired employer when I was back in college. However, I went to the employer directly and I got hired months later. So even back then, I realized there's more to one way to get hired. And so the key is to look at how you're getting hired. Now, if you don't get hired on campus with that format, where you lead with no objective, right, or summary, the more relevant word nowadays is they call it summary, right? So and I just say that to say that. That's all. I'm not being corrective in any way. If you go out in the wild, which is going to be how most college graduates and even senior level people now are going to find their job, not through a third party recruiter, not through a campus recruiter, but going out in the wild and talking to people. You need to have a job title up top of what you're looking for. You need to have 2 or 3 relevant achievements that you lead within your summary to say, here's the things that I can do that are most relevant to what I've researched that you need, right? You need that document to introduce what you're doing. So it's not about you need to have an objective. You don't need to have an objective. Both are right. If you are going through campus recruiting, having a summary up top is pointless. But if you are going through a third-party recruiter, having a summary up top is pointless because you have a third-party recruiter acting as a broker, essentially, verbally introduce. They're a verbal cover letter, right? They're on the phone, Zoom, typing, introducing you to that prospective employer. You don't need a cover letter if you're going through a third-party recruiter. You typically don't need a cover letter if you're going through a campus recruiter. But if you are going out in the wild, you should have a good cover letter because some might ask for it, and you should have a summary up top to make it clear because you don't have somebody introducing you to that situation. So it's about looking at the exercise and the path in which you're making yourself known, and how do you reach that audience the best way. This is a marketing exercise. So it's not about don't use this, use this. That's why I'm like always really cringy about absolute advice, because it depends on the path in which you are introducing yourself and who you're trying to reach.
And that's what I said to the kid. I was like, look, Lisa's advice to you is if you're using a recruiter, this is the introduction. They're handing it to you. They're providing value. They're adding on value. They're saying, I met with Susie Smith. Susie Smith's a rock star. She did. You don't need it. But if Susie Smith's going direct and she's doing her own cold outreach,
you got to make it clear what you're doing. And that's why, like, sometimes third-party recruiters, right? I love them. I was one. Or even corporate recruiters for that matter. Like when they're like, oh, I don't like cover letters, and they put out these absolutes. And look, I'm the first one to say I'm a recruiter. I understand how hiring works. You should hire me. So I'm not saying my recruiting experience doesn't matter. But I'm going to tell you, the first thing I realized when I got into this business after being a third-party recruiter for 13 years was what I just said. Oh, yeah, I was a recruiter who never read cover letters. But if I was also introducing my candidates to companies, there's an implied level of trust, right? And so I realized when I was getting paid to do this for candidates hiring me directly, I had to write stuff that helped them marketed when they weren't going through a third-party recruiter, when they were approaching people directly, because they didn't have a broker essentially acting as their advocate in getting them in, or a referral. So it's having strong marketing documents and having strong outreach messaging that you can approach people cold. You might approach somebody you haven't talked to in 5 years, and they're like excited to talk to you because you look the part. Or making your documents where if somebody's referring you, they're proud to refer you. And they're not like, yeah, just ignore the resume. This person's great. I mean, you don't want an introduction like that. You know, you don't want your referral qualifying that essentially your resume sucks, but they're great. You don't want that. So, making a referral in this climate particularly expends an incredible amount of political capital. Make it easy for them to refer you because you look amazing, because you are leading with recent relevant achievements that are streamlined, and you're not just like overproving by having everything but the kitchen sink lumped into your very crammed resume. Like, look the part and look powerful and make them look good for referring you.
exactly. And just a side note, how do you feel about resumes that go over 2 pages?
I have done CEO resumes of brands you've heard of, and they had 2-page resumes. So generally speaking, if you have over 10 years of experience, 2 pages is fine. There's always exceptions to the rule. If your experience prior to 15 to 20 years ago actually has a great story to it, or has some degree of value to the industry or profession that you're in, there might be exceptions to the rule. But for most people, going into great detail of your experience that would probably cause you to go on to a 3rd page, if that's more than 15 to 20 years ago, all it's doing is dating them unnecessarily for most of us, and then the other reasons for third or 4th pages are like if you have lists of patents or speaking engagements, or and again, all those should be relevant to what you're going for.
Okay. So I want you to expand on when you tell people. You and I are very aligned in terms of the marketing of a human, very much like a marketing of a brand, etc., and putting your best foot forward and differentiating. And you are not, I always say to people, you are not for everyone.
You shouldn't be. You're actually failing in your marketing if you feel like you are, and that's actually working for you, because then what do you really stand for if it appeals to everybody?
Correct. I always say if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. So I want you to elaborate a little bit from your perspective when you're working with a paid client, not somebody who's just giving, like, hey, give me free advice. And they're not comfortable picking a swim lane. I hear that a lot. Like I have clients who will be like, no, I can't do three key marketing messages, or I can't, go down to that final. Oh, I can't just be about that industry. I have to be for everybody. I'm like, okay, back up. So I want you to say, what is it that you tell a client about fit, culture, being clear about when they're not for everyone? Like, how does that work?
So we work with clients in two capacities. The first is pretty obvious, like somebody knows what they want. We help them showcase what they want to continue doing to their targets and line everything up with the messaging as well as the branding, the outreach and the branding. The other way we work with people is when someone is genuinely unsure what lane or even two lanes. Like I would say you can't really do more than two lanes, right? We help them in one of two ways when they're not sure and they're in this other category. One is we help them with an exploratory search. And we write what essentially is an exploratory resume. At this point, like I described earlier, if somebody's a COO, they're not going to not be a COO anymore. They might just not know where to do it or what type of company or, what industry or what location. You still need solid marketing documents, resume and a profile that outline what you want to continue doing, to go out and just have networking conversations, exploratory conversations with people. And you're going to learn like, oh, I thought I wanted to go into that industry, but that's terrible. I don't want to do that. Or I didn't even know this was an option. I love this. I'm going to pursue this now. But in order for you to reach out to people on LinkedIn cold, first thing they're going to do is look you up on LinkedIn. You have to look like somebody that they want to have an exploratory conversation with. And so you have exploratory conversations to help narrow down what fields, or what industries or what segments you want to do whatever you do in, right? So that's the first way we work with somebody when they're not sure. The other rationale that I give people is I remind them that people are attracted to strength. And I really wish I had the money and the time to do this study because I've seen it happen over 30 years, both as a recruiter and as a job landing consultant. If you are specific and you are strong, right? Companies are attracted to that strength. And how many times have you been in a scenario where people are like, oh my God, that person's amazing. We only have this opening. Let's approach them with it and see if they'll do it. Because you want the strength, right? And then that person has the option if they're going to concede or wiggle around and do something a little different or stick to what they are being put out, what they're putting out specifically. But when someone is broad and bland, trying to appeal to everyone, that's not strong. And to your point, you're making the reader work to see where you fit, right? And so then you're competing against people who are being specific. So you're not looking strong enough compared to the competition, the other fellow A-level competition that you are up against at this point. And so you don't get even the like, hey, I got this thing available, even though you're looking for that thing, because you don't look strong and they don't want to risk you being unhappy because you're not being pronounced in what you want. Right? So that's obviously a little nuancy, but like, that's why strength is important. And then I always use like the dating analogy. And granted, I'm married 31 years, and I don't know if I'm even right on this analogy, but I know what I would respond to even today. Like, I don't want someone who's just like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? I'll do whatever you want. I'll be whatever you need. Ew, right? Like, ew. And that's what job seekers are doing when they're trying to be broad and appeal to everybody. It's like, I'll be whatever you need. No. People want people who are strong in their stance. And you might make, concessions, or you might realize an opportunity that you didn't know aware of and pivot. And that's all fine, but it's all in the context of strength and deliberateness. This wishy-washy, I'm trying to be open and I want to see what you have, that would never work as a friend, and that would never work as a marital partner. Why do we think it's going to work in a career?
It's so true. I'm like, what is that? Like you show up looking so blah.
Yeah, it's just very like mush-mouthy, like it and people pleasy. And look, I say this as a semi-recovering people pleaser, so I'm not being critical. Like I am guilty of this my own self sometimes. But sometimes you got to just take a stand and do your best and realize being rejected is just part of you finding your people instead of, instead of like, oh God, somebody didn't want me. It's like, no, that's sometimes a good thing.
Oh, love it. That was so refreshing to hear it from somebody else. Whoop. Okay. So, what's the difference in your mind between someone who's been at a company for 20 years and someone who's been at 6 companies in 20 years in terms of how the market sees them today?
There's no difference in a sense that it's the same exercise. Who are you targeting? Right? Are they going to view your story as a positive or a negative? Based on that decision, you still showcase the positive and downplay the negative. That's it. Right? And if ultimately you do all that exercise, you do all those exercises and it's not a match, it means it's not that you're lying and you're not going to say you were working somewhere 20 years and you had 6 employers, and you're not going to, at 20 years, there's a negative stance to that too. People are like, oh, you didn't do any change. It's like, I've had a different job every year for 20 years because I got promoted, but they don't, oh, but you didn't change environment. Like, there's always going to be people who view what you do negatively. Like, even the most positive, upwardly linear, semi-perfect, there's going to be people who were like, well, I'm just not seeing, I'm sure you got something. Like, there's always going to be skeptics. And if you come from a big company and you've been promoted and you're targeting a small company, well, they're going to be like, we don't have the resources you're accustomed to. How are you going to adjust? So it's all about making sure you adjust your story in such a way that is digestible to your target, that is not compromising what you want to continue doing. So there's no bad or worse to either of those backgrounds, because there's positives and negatives to both, and it's about showcasing the positive and downplaying the negative.
Junior level people these days will have a 9 month to a year sort of stint, and then they repeat that sort of pattern for 4, 5, 6 years at a time. Do you have that same advice or that same reaction to that scenario?
Yes and no, right? I think that you always have to look at the negative of whatever your scenario is, right? And the negative of somebody early in their career having 6 jobs in 6 years, there's going to be an audience that is going to be like, well, can they stick around a long time? How can they say that they have grown when they haven't even seen a cycle at the same company? Like, these are all things that are genuine business concerns by anyone hiring that type of person. And what will make them hire you anyway is how you handle those questions, right? That's anything. Like, there's no positive or negative only to any situation. It's how you handle the situation, because you can have that same person have one employer for 6 years, and if you come across like you can't handle change, or you're not going to be able to handle the resource, like, and then they're going to look at that negatively. Oh, they're not going to work here, right? So like, they're too entrenched in that culture, they're not going to be able to change. Like, everything can be twisted, right? So it comes down to your confidence about handling whatever questions you hope they don't ask. And even in answering, you have to then ask yourself if that's a culture still that you want to be in. If you're going to get the job, and every person you come in contact with has been there for 40 years, and you're the only one coming in with 6 jobs in 6 years, well, guess what? You're going to be proving yourself possibly over and over and over again in this organization. So even if you succeed through the interview, do you want to be there? Because guess what? When you land an offer, whatever you sold them leading up to that point, you now need to maintain. Right? So if you've been fudging and squashing because you're just trying to get the job, well, now that you got the job, if you go in being your unabashed self that you kept under wraps to get the job, well, now they're going to be unhappy. And if you maintain the lie, the image, whatever word you want to use that got you the job, you're going to probably be miserable in the job. So this is why, to go back to your, annoying word authenticity, this is why it's important to take an honest stance in what you want, and really outline what you want, and diminish and not delete what you don't want. And what are your, must-haves, and what are your, nice-to-haves, and what you don't care about. Because then when you go into that job, if you've honored most of those, because nothing's perfect, you will then, that is your responsibility for setting yourself for happiness in the next job. Right? That's what we can do for ourselves. It's never 100% up to our employers. Happiness is an inside job in my book. And if you are making all these concessions to land a job, well, guess what? You succeeded. So now you got to maintain the concessions, and either, that might be a good reason. There might be very good reasons for doing that. I'm never, we've all made concessions, right? We all got bills to pay, families to take care of, people to take care of, just things, right? We all make concessions, but if the concessions you're making are part of your core beliefs, you're going to basically sign yourself up for an unhappy ride. And that's the only thing you can take responsibility for.
Well, gee, Lisa, I just feel like it's trying to create a life you love. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
On the same page. So you're on the advisory board of an agentic AI firm in recruiting. So where is recruiting actually headed, and what should job seekers be doing right now to stay ahead of it relative to the AI trend?
I'm the only, ex-recruiter, currently non-recruiter that I'm aware of on our board. And, it's been fascinating to kind of see this on the inside. And it's like the Wild West. I mean, there's some that are using AI, like they have 10, 15 agents that they've developed and that are helping them, find and source. And there's recruiters that are releasing their LinkedIn recruiter license and not even using LinkedIn recruiter to find people, which they predominantly did over the last decade, because these agents are helping them find talent like readily, on the internet in the wild, which, if you're, again, especially as an executive, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn only and not anywhere else, like if these recruiters start migrating off of LinkedIn, and I don't think they're doing it any droves or anything like that, but like some of the more advanced recruiters, how can you be findable? Are you findable outside of LinkedIn, right? So, and then there's the importance of having your profile done on LinkedIn because it's also discoverable on the internet, right? So if you have those settings set, so it's just, and then there's certain recruiters that are really struggling because they don't know how to market themselves. They're still hesitant or just slow to adopt the AI pieces of things. But on the flip side, I've heard corporate stories outside of this, board's experience that I have, where companies abandoned, human people and went to AI, and they realized AI isn't working, and now they're going back to, the human piece of it. So it's like anything else with advancement. It's not linear, and it's often not pretty. I mentioned the downside to the hiring is just that the AI access to job seekers has made everyone whitewash the same. And, it makes it harder for them to find people. It makes the job has gotten harder in many ways, even with AI, as much as there's aspects of it that have made it easier. So it's not any one thing. There's all these little microeconomies that exist within each industry, each company, each recruiter. Like, it's just based on the level of the people they recruit. It's just interesting. It's fascinating to just see what's happening on the inside. But it's not what I can tell you. The one thing it's not, to use my favorite Toy Story movie reference, it's not like a robot that's like Claude decides who stays and who goes, and like recruiters are just sitting back not doing any work. Like that's not happening. AI is essentially the tool, the way Boolean search is a tool, the way, database sorters are a tool, the way, a stack of resumes printed out on your desk back in the day used to be a tool. Like it's just simply a tool. And in the introduction of a new tool, recruiters are never abandoning every other tool they've ever used. They're simply using a different tool in addition to all the tools they normally use for every search to see where that person comes from, that next talent, hire comes from. So that's a common misconception a lot of people make, is that they think like, oh, everybody's using AI. They are. Maybe they are. Well, first of all, not everybody's using it, but it doesn't mean they're not using the other things they do as well.
It's not an all or nothing sort of scenario. I liked the answer that you gave, which is it is another tool in our toolbox, and it is an acceleration, but Moore's law has been around for decades. And so for the same reason that you have more computing power in your iPhone than they had when Apollo 13 went up to the moon, that's the same thing. It doesn't mean that we're going to, not go up to the moon anymore.
No. Well, no, just because I always like to use construction analogies. Like just because we have the existence of a nail gun, it's not like we're throwing away every hammer. Like you still need a hammer, like, and A good recruit, a good construction person is going to have both.
I like that. I'm going to use that because I'm very big on construction analogies. So on this note, I want to ask you a funny question. What was the best and worst career advice you were ever given?
I'd say some of the worst advice was probably from an upbringing, immigrant type first gen upbringing, lower socioeconomic upbringing and it was all meant to protect me. It was nothing bad in its intention, but it was, just work really hard, keep your head down, don't bring attention to yourself and it'll work itself out. And I'm kind of really grateful, blessed, that I somehow had this epiphany at about 27, 28 as an introvert, that if I didn't learn how to sell myself and my ideas, that I'd probably be frustrated and underemployed the rest of my life. I have no idea where that divine intervention came from, but that's kind of what helped me start realizing I needed to do things differently and I couldn't just outwork everybody. So that was probably the worst advice I had. And some of the best advice I had that I took, honestly, a long time to adapt to, being a bit of an introvert who was afraid to put myself out there at first, as based on that story I just told you, was talk to people and it's okay to ask for help. I used to view asking for help as a weakness. I can't say I still don't fall into that now and again, but asking for help is probably the most liberating and multiplying move anyone can make.
What would be the career advice you'd want the people listening or watching today to take away from you?
If you are only given 2 activities to do, one being submit your resume to people to jobs online, or the other is to go to networking events, I would say go to networking events. I'm not saying abandon the job boards by any means, but you will never make a mistake talking to people. You might have a time suck if you just sit there and try to apply to jobs, to faceless job openings.
I love you.
I love you
I
too.
think what if you had the opportunity to speak to your 30-year-old self today, and I know that's not possible, but if you were able to, or their 27-year-old or whatever, what would you tell her?
Be gentle on yourself and you're doing okay. I was very hard on myself and I asked my kids for forgiveness and being hard on them too, because I was doing that. And now I realize as I'm older and they're older that like I just needed to just take it down a notch. And what I was doing was probably fine. And perfect is literally never the goal. It's just, it's unattainable, number one. And any thoughts of attaining it is usually an illusion. And every mistake led me to a great thing that I have. So there's really, I'd say that really, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit, I'd say that's the ultimate advice, is there are no mistakes. There's just pivots and redirection. That's it. There's really no mistakes. When I look back at like software vendors that I've chosen that were terrible, or, coaches that I hired that were not right for me, or, mistakes I made in college, like just, mistakes I made in my first jobs. Like when I look at everything, it put me on the path. It literally, every one of them, either directly, forcefully, or just somewhat tangentially, put me on the path that I'm on now. So there's really no mistakes.
Well, that's it. Those are the words of wisdom, my friends. Thank you, possibility seekers. Thank you, Lisa Rangel, for being with us today. It has been an ultimate pleasure. And please reach out to Lisa on LinkedIn or her website if you want to engage and really kick some ass in today's job market. Thank you so much and make it a great day. Remember to share, remember to post, remember to rate. Let's go, people. Let's make it happen. Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique de Maio, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it, or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at moniquedemaio.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.